I don't even know if I knew what my values were, but I was certainly not, I was not a believer, and I was not politically informed at all. I just went.
An atheist?
I've vacillated between atheist and agnostic, but yeah, certainly not like a walk with Christ.
Pro-life or pro-choice?
I would have called it pro-choice. Now I'd call it pro-abortion movement. I reject this idea of pro-choice. But yes, I would have called myself pro-choice at the time.
Freedom of speech?
I think I would have been for freedom of speech, actually. Yes. Yeah.
Both sides. Left
Yes,
and right.
because see, I was not like a zealot. What I thought, and I think a lot of people my age, a lot of people, I'm a millennial, a lot of people in Southern California, I was an actress. I just thought if you were a compassionate person, you voted Democrat because you cared about minorities and you cared about women. And why shouldn't, everyone be able to be married? And that was the extent of it. So I wasn't like one of these crazy, blue hair screaming, shut everything down. But I didn't really know what was going on. I was just like, vote for the president every 4 years, Obama, Hillary, and leave it.
TDS?
Oh, yeah.
You had one?
Uh-huh. Yeah, absolutely.
Tell me what happened in 2020.
Well,
so you became a woman of God, pro-life, no TDS, you're a Republican?
I'm a Republican. I call myself a Christian first, then a conservative, and then a Republican. I am sometimes not fond of calling myself a Republican because I do, of course, have qualms with the Republican Party at times, but a conservative first and foremost. Mm-hmm.
What happened in 2020?
Well, in 2020, March 2020 happened, and I lost both of my jobs overnight. And never saw those jobs again.
What were those jobs?
I was just a waitress, and I was an after-school tutor. But those jobs, they weren't careers, but they were important to me. I had left acting a couple years prior, and in fact, one of the reasons I had left acting, it's not the sole reason. But one of the reasons I had left was this intense push for racial diversity above everything. I saw it first in acting, in Hollywood, in theater, and then it spread outward,
But you're a woman. How did you see that? I mean, if you were a white male, yeah, maybe you could feel that, but you're a woman.
Well, but, I think there's a hate. I think white men get it worse, straight white men, but there's a hatred for white women too, especially if you're not on the right side of things. And at the time I was, but it was so clear that theater, Hollywood, they only wanted to tell one story and it wasn't mine. I would see unnecessary pushes for racial, skin tone diversity, which I don't take issue with, but if it's like your only goal, and obviously a lot of the plays that started coming out, because I love theater, they were anti-Trump, and it was just one side, one narrative, and that's not what storytelling is about. That's not what art is about. And at the time I was anti-Trump, but I still didn't like it, and I don't like the phrase white privilege because it doesn't match my experience. I think we're all privileged to live in America, but it has nothing to do with skin color. And my family has struggled quite a bit. It's all relative, but we've struggled a great deal, especially financially. And so I felt pushed out of Hollywood, and it's also just a hard road to go down. But so that had stayed with me for a couple years. And then when COVID came around, I followed all the rules. I did everything that was asking me. I didn't see family. I had a grandmother dying needlessly alone, not from COVID, but alone because of the response to COVID. And she did end up dying, alone.
Literally?
And it had nothing to do with COVID. It just had to do with people could not visit her because she was in a home, and she died alone. And she wasn't in her right mind either. So I don't even know if she knew why she was alone.
That's horrendous.
It is. And, I didn't go anywhere but the grocery store, wore a mask. I did it all because I was a liberal, and also we had never been in this situation before, and I was scared and I wanted to do my part. But when George Floyd died and the unrest happened in Los Angeles and around the nation, and I was told that I could go out and be part of these protests or riots, but I couldn't go to work, that blew my mind. It felt like such a slap in the face because I had been following all the rules, and at that point it was, June, and we had been going through this since March. There had been no talk in Los Angeles about maybe getting back to work. It feels like a slap in the face to be called non-essential when your job is essential to you. And so then for this unrest to come about, and then I saw a lot of the medical community supporting it and the politicians and certainly Republicans as well, but LA just milked it for every drop that it was worth. And it went on beyond that. You know, we were in a mask mandate for 2 straight years in Los Angeles. And we had vaccine passports for 6 months where, you know, you couldn't go into a bar or restaurant. So it's not like it was a little blip on the radar. And so summer 2020, I walked away from the Democrat Party because I had thought that this was the party for the little guy, which is what I consider myself, like for the underdog, for the working class, for the struggling. And I knew I wasn't the only one struggling. But whenever I brought it up about the disparity between the response to COVID and the response to the BLM unrest, I was called, all my liberal friends called me racist and selfish. You know, I was told racist. Well, because there was this weird narrative at the time about how the only people who are upset about lockdowns are wealthy white women, you know, who want to go get their hair and nails done. And it was like you weren't giving due credence to the Black experience in America. You shouldn't be concerned with going to work, or people were dying. And then they tried to do that narrative where minorities were dying more from COVID. So if you had issue with the lockdown or any of the response to COVID, you didn't care about the disparity in racial deaths to COVID. So it was very weird. They tried to like tie it together. And of course, now in retrospect, but we all knew it at the time, we were right. You know, this response to COVID did more harm than good. And it wasn't even necessarily that I couldn't go to work or that I couldn't do these things. It was that whenever I brought it up, they refused to acknowledge that I might have any honest reason for disagreeing. And I had agreed with all the other liberal ideologies, but I just wanted to go to work, and I needed to go visit family. I needed to get my life back. And very early on, it was really clear that a lot of us were going to survive this. And I think people forget that sometimes. We knew early on that, you know, it only affected a very small minority of people, and we knew it didn't spread outdoors, and we knew it didn't really spread on surfaces. And yet LA like never course corrected. We just kept shutting down playgrounds and shutting down jungle gyms and shutting down the outdoors. And we had the weird plastic dividers. It's as we learned more about the virus, we never course corrected in LA, as evidenced by the 2-year-long mask mandate. And then vaccine passports, well after I walked away. I mean, the vaccine passports started late 2021 and I walked away summer 2020. So, I mean, it was crazy. And that's what opened the door for me to start listening to voices that I honestly didn't even know existed. And if I had known they existed, I probably would have very much disagreed with them.
Like what?
Oh, like Ben Shapiro, Dennis Prager come to mind. And I mean, I also realized at the time, it seemed to me like Trump was the only one talking about opening the nation. You know, it's to someone who didn't know anything about politics, it seemed like only Trump was. And I hated him so much, but I was more desperate to figure out what was going on. Like, why has the world gone mad? And so I started looking into him and realized I've been lied to about him. So that was like another domino in the thing. You know, I saw the fact that he didn't say there were very fine people on both sides. And for 3 years, you know, and I'm an intelligent person, but for 3 years, I had actually thought he did say that because that was what I was shown. And that, you know, it's like, if he's as bad as you say he is, and I do have a lot of qualms with Trump, but if he's as bad as you say he is, why are you lying about him? And that felt like another betrayal. And so then I started listening to these voices, and slowly over the course of about a year, I mean, I did end up voting for Trump in 2020 proudly, but over the course of about a year, I shifted to pro-life and conservative because I realized that the conservative side of things every single time makes sense. I mean, there's no logic, no consistency, no ethics, no morality on the other side of things. You know, I realized that on the, what I would call now the pro-abortion side of things, it's just emotion, you know, and very strong emotion, but just emotion. I mean, there's no science, no ethics, no nothing. And
no evidence, no proofs.
Right, exactly. And it felt like that all the way down. And what I realized so often is that, yeah, the Democrat Party claims to care about minorities, claims to care about immigrants, claims to care about women. But in fact, a lot of their policies end up hurting minorities, women, the people at the border, you know, because the secure border is a humane border. So it's like this faux compassion turned up to 11. But if you take it a level deeper and you actually think about it for longer than 10 minutes or study the effects of these policies, you see that Democrat policies are hurting the very people they claim to help. And I lived that in 2020 because the Democrat response to COVID it feels like the Republicans, the red states, they course corrected. LA never did. California never did. And their policies hurt me. And that was like the light bulb that I needed to realize actually Democrat policies are harmful to people that they claim to want to help, you know? And that was the rest is history.
So I had a woman, very intelligent one here, I want to say 6 to 8 months ago. So she was from Virginia. And after we did the podcast, we had a small talk. And she told me she's not going to vote for Trump in Virginia just because of this one single reason. She still thinks that Russia hoax was true. I was like, wait a minute, so there are multiple proofs that that's not true, right? That's a hoax. No, she doesn't believe me. She doesn't want even to get into it and to read the article. Or
that's her only reason.
Yes, I'm not going to vote for Trump in 2024 just because the Russiagate is true.
Is she abstaining or she's voting for Kamala? She didn't get
I
that
don't
far.
know. She
Wow.
didn't. So at that time, Joe Biden was on the ballot, I want to say. Kamala was just the VP.
5 months ago, yeah.
But TDS is real.
Yeah, it is real. And I think that when you're that indoctrinated, and I was, and brainwashed, you can look at evidence and deny it. You can look at a video, you can look at, and you reject it. I think that unfortunately, a lot of times humans have to suffer to change. Like I had to suffer. Not that I hadn't suffered prior, but I had never connected the dots again between my suffering and Democrat policies. And there it was like staring me in the face in 2020. So prior to that, if someone had shown me evidence, even if I saw like, oh, he said, but they should be condemned totally, not the neo-Nazis, not the white supremacists. Even if I saw that prior to 2020, I think I would have rejected it. I would have said, oh, but this, oh, but that. And I think that's what they do.